This presentation is the first in a series on each chapter of the Predictioneer's game by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita. So I'm going to go through each chapter offering some commentary on it, some interpretations on it. It's meant as part of a course I'm teaching on forecasting and game theory, but it's also meant to be generally useful for anyone reading the book. In the interest of full disclosure, I should say that Bruce Bueno de Mesquita was my PhD advisor, mentor, and kind of became a personal friend. And so certainly I'm on Facebook with him. So if I call him Bruce or any of these other things, you will understand. And I, warn you that I went to University of Rochester, and I at one point drank this Kool-Aid very well. However, as we go through the book, I'm going to keep it online, talking about what I see and trying to help people read between the lines and have some context into what's going on in each chapter. Okay, the book starts out with the Leopold II example. And in this example, Bruce is going to try to, emphasize the difference between Leopold II as the ruler of Belgium and Leopold II as the ruler of the Belgian Congo. And in his words, in one case, he was progressive, a very progressive ruler, the case of Belgium, and in the Belgian Congo, he's a monster, right? Just an absolute monster. And why is that? Now, what Bruce is going to be talking about here is the role of institutional incentives, right? That the same person has different incentives in the two different roles, and that is going to create different behavior. And this alludes to selectorate theory, which is based off of Bruce Bueno de Mesquita, Alistair Smith, Randy Siverson, and James Morrow's research. And again, all of them I know, but they came up with selectorate theory, which looks at this question of how are there different incentives in democracies versus dictatorships. And the intro chapter gives a very nice, concise explanation of it all. And so it's very useful. And bottom line is that they come to this conclusion that, as he says here, the quote I got here, those who want to run a country for a long time are ill-advised to go around promoting peace and prosperity, that basically dictators who provide private benefits to their supporters as opposed to promoting the general welfare, well, they tend to stay in power longer. However, in a democracy, you can't do that. The system does not incentivize that behavior, so democratic leaders have to behave very differently. And they don't stay in power for long. Unfortunately, the system tends to kick them out very quickly. And so he argues that dictators are not evil, democratic leaders are not saints. They do what the system incentivizes them to do to stay in power. And so in a nutshell, that's a really great explanation of selectorate theory. And Leopold is a great example of same guy, two different roles, two different sets of behavior. Now, as far as the book goes, this is in some ways kind of takes you in a different direction. He's trying to show some meta things here, but the book is going to focus on how to forecast events, right? And so it's kind of this thing of you've got to put a pin in the selectorate theory as he moves on to talk about things that are more the focus of the book, which is how do you forecast events based on our understanding of how individuals strategically behave. And that is going to be, really the main thing. So the principal claim about halfway through the chapter is he says, look, it's possible to anticipate individual actions and predict the future by systematically applying a game theoretic model to predictions, right? To doing predictions in a scientific way. And the whole book is going to talk about how to do that. Also, he's going to emphasize that, look, we can also look for ways to change incentives and engineer future outcomes, right? That we're not stuck with things. This is not mere prediction. It is a causal model that will explain different outcomes and will explain, and in fact, his model will basically anticipate many different possibilities and say, look, if you do this other thing, you'll get a better outcome, right? So he is able to predict contingencies. And his larger stuff with the selectorate theory kind of tells you, okay, where are the incentives, and can we look at what the incentives are and maybe engineer future outcomes? Big emphasis, though, I think, on the first part in the book. The chapter ends up largely with his example of his first prediction on India. And he talks about, being asked to predict an election in India. And it was a question of, as he lays it out, it's a choice between science and punditry. From his knowledge of India, and he started out very much as an India scholar, he made one prediction. He thought one candidate would win. And he had a model, though, of decision making. And he decided when the State Department calls him, he's like, well, let me try to see what this model would say, right? And so he has a model where he has created a simulation, or he's created this schematic of the logical actions of people and how they make decisions and how they anticipate the decisions of others. And he's got that. He also takes a legal pad and he estimates the inputs for that model, what each individual decision maker's preferences are over outcomes, their ideal outcome, their power, how much clout is and he uses different terms. He uses, instead of power, maybe clout, and how much they care about influencing the outcome. I would say salience, right? So he has these things, and he starts laying out, these are the key individual inputs. And he does these things separately, right? He's already had the model. He now gets these individual preferences, and he comes up with a prediction that everyone thinks is crazy, right? And then it turns out to be absolutely right. And he's like, an aha moment, right? This is what I can do in life. And that sets us up for kind of what he's going to do throughout the book and how he's going to explain these things. And in doing this, I think, as I interpret this, he talks about getting the output from the computer. And there are always aspects of this that are a black box. He is going to explain things. He's got a lot of information out there in the public about how his model works, but it is a bit proprietary. He is not going to give you the whole thing. And over the years, I've, as a student of his in the 90s, I would listen, we talk about it, and I never really worried about trying to reverse engineer the thing. That wasn't what I was doing. But as I read the book and I go through it, there's some interpretations, right? First of all, there's this black box, and this black box has two things. It has the theoretical model, right? The game theoretic model of how decision making occurs. Then it also has a computer simulation to take inputs, because the game theoretic model says, it assumes people have power preferences and salience over issues, and it lays out how they would make decisions. But in terms of simulating it, you actually have to say, okay, what are the preferences, and what are the moves, what's the sequence of moves, and what are the different things. And so you have a causal theoretical mathematical model, right, on the one hand, and then you have this computer simulation. And when he talks about the outcome, when he runs all of this together and he talks about the outcomes, I think, and an insight I have, and I don't have any private information on this, but I am pretty sure that his computer simulation is pretty much a brute force thing, anticipating every possible outcome from, just who moves first, and we go through a cycle. Okay, if this person moves first and second, and it gets big, right? And he describes in this example, he has hundreds of pages of output, and he talks about the model saying this will happen and that will happen. And I'm pretty sure that it's Bruce reading this stuff, interpreting the model. And that is a big part of what he does as a researcher. And when working these things, that the computer is not responding like the computer to the enterprise telling, well, this is what's going to happen. The computer gives him just all bleh. here's all the different possibilities, and he has to sort through them and, probably identify, okay, here's an outcome, or here's the outcome that's happening the most, or, and he has to interpret these results. And there's a lot of interpretation. And so I believe that as you read the book and he says, the model says this, it is saying that, but he is bringing order to a massive amount of output. And so sometimes it really seems like this computer simulation must be brilliant, right, to come up. And my it's not my, I do not have private information on this, but in reading between the lines, I'm pretty sure that we're getting is just kind of massive output that is being sorted and being organized into and interpreted by him. So that's an important thing that I think as you go through the book, you need to know. But okay, that's what I got on the first chapter. And as he goes in, he's going to talk about game theory and a lot of different things. But that first chapter really sets things up pretty well, I think.